Hey guys, Cam here from Pocket-lint, and in the world of affordable smartphones, there's been one series of phones that's consistently delivered great performance for the money, and that's the Moto G series. It's grown and evolved over the last few years, but it's still arguably the best phone for under £200. But it does have competition now. We recently got sent the Nokia 5.3, and if you're glancing down the spec sheet, you might look at these two and think they're both pretty much exactly the same and they'll give you the same performance. But as we know, comparisons aren't won and lost on a spec sheet. It doesn't tell you all the experiences you're gonna get. So how does Nokia's latest Android One phone compare? Let's find out. Now, looking at the design of the two phones, there's plenty to differentiate them. Both are plastic, but Moto's pinstriped glossy finish is very different to Nokia's matte finish. In the hand, I actually prefer the softer matte finish. It feels more comfortable, thanks in part to the phone being ever so slightly thinner and lighter. It's also less prone to slipping off things or attracting fingerprints. And both of those are good things. Buttons and ports are mostly the same too, but Nokia has a couple of nice touches here. There's a dedicated button on the left for launching the Google Assistant, and the power button on the right pulses with a subtle white light when you have a notification waiting. Both phones have fingerprint sensors on the back, and we found Moto's to be a bit more reliable and responsive, especially when it comes to swiping it down to get to notifications. Despite all of that, the glossy look of the Moto does give it a more premium look in my opinion, as does the display on the front, which has a more modern hole punch cutout for the selfie camera rather than a notch. Both phones have relatively thin bezels around the screen though, and both have the thicker chin on the bottom, although Nokia's has its branding on it. Now, moving on to displays, and both are 720p displays. The exact technical specs aren't the same. For instance, Nokia has 40 more pixels vertically, but the pixel density is the same on both because Nokia has a longer aspect ratio. That also means it measures at 6.55 inches versus Motorola's 6.4, but when you're watching content, you'll see that sharpness is pretty much the same on the two. That's to say, fine details do get a little bit rough, especially when you view them up close. But at this end of the smartphone market, you expect that. What is different though is the way that they process colours. Overall, with both in their default settings, the Motorola seemed a bit more vibrant, and we found that when it came to displaying my personal skin tone in videos or photos viewed on the Nokia, it was a lot more washed out than it is naturally. On the same note, white backgrounds behind app icons and menus were a lot cleaner and brighter on the Moto G8 as well. And that was with the G8 set in its default natural setting. It has a more vivid one you can choose if you want to. Now, with both of these phones using the Snapdragon 655 processor, you're not going to get lightning fast performance on either of them. That's to be expected for phones that cost this little. You get the same 64GB of storage on both, but more RAM options on Nokia. But both are units of 4GB of RAM, so they're the same in that regard. That means when you're loading the two phones up, you might sometimes need to wait a second or two for various apps or interfaces to load. And you do get slightly stuttering animations when scrolling through lists. Being quite a low-powered phone with relatively low-resolution screens, the game graphics do look a bit rough in terms of sharpness and frame rates. But we noticed a lot more stuttering and frame dropping on the Nokia phone compared to the Moto. Pushing quite intense games like Asphalt 9 was a bit smoother on the Motorola. We didn't have as many instances where it stuttered badly, unlike the Nokia where it seemed to happen quite a lot. In terms of battery life, you're going to get fairly similar day-to-day performance on the two phones. They both have the same 4000 mAh battery. When it comes to watching videos or playing games, it seemed like the Moto was consuming battery a little bit faster. In truth, there's not a lot in it though. Like most modern phones, we get to bedtime with somewhere between 30 and 40% left over. Camera-wise, again, the two phones do have similar systems in that you have a primary and an ultra-wide camera, as well as either one or two secondary cameras, but both of them have a macro sensor. Now, comparing the two, you'll see the Motorola has the wider angles on both of these, but again, colours are processed differently. A lot of the time the Nokia would produce deeper colours and higher contrast, which isn't always a bad thing, but sometimes means the images don't look all that natural. Using the front-facing camera or the macro camera on the back, it would be the opposite way around. With these two cameras, it was the Nokia that looked more washed out. Now, overall, if I was to choose one of these phones, as you can probably tell by now, I would probably choose the Moto. It might cost a tiny bit more, but we feel you get a better deal for your money. Performance was a little better when playing games, and the camera produced better colours in my view, and the display is nicer to look at, and it was slightly less prone to frame dropping and stuttering. Nokia is part of the Android One program though, so you do get quick and regular software updates for at least 2 years. But with both running a close to stock version of Android, the actual experience of using the two is pretty much the same. I've been Cam, I'm at Cam Bunton on Twitter and other social media networks if you want to get in touch with me. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up. If you disagree with me, leave a comment, and subscribe if you want to see more. I'll see you again soon.